Number 5. The Great Chinese Famine. History is often defined by its wars, but some of the greatest tragedies occur in the absence of a single bullet being fired. Between 1959 and 1961, the world witnessed the deadliest famine in human history. China was to be transformed from an agrarian society into an industrial superpower overnight. But behind the posters of smiling workers and miracle harvests lay a reality of systemic collapse and a death toll that remains debated to this day, ranging from 15 million to over 45 million people. In 1958, Mao Zedong launched the Great Leap Forward. The goal was simple: overtake Great Britain's industrial output within 15 years. To do this, China implemented two radical changes: collectivization and the backyard steel campaign. Private property was abolished. Peasants were moved into massive communes where they ate in communal kitchens and worked under military-style discipline.
At the same time, millions of farmers were pulled away from their crops to operate backyard furnaces, melting down household tools to create low-quality pig iron that was essentially useless. Private property was abolished. Peasants were moved into massive communes where they ate in communal kitchens and worked under military-style discipline.
At the same time, millions of farmers were pulled away from their crops to operate backyard furnaces, melting down household tools to create low-quality pig iron that was essentially useless. Then came the war on nature. The Four Pests campaign targeted flies, mosquitoes, rats, and sparrows. The mass killing of sparrows led to an ecological disaster, with no birds to eat them. Locust populations exploded, devouring what little grain was left. Perhaps the most tragic element was the wind of exaggeration. Local officials, pressured to meet impossible quotas, began reporting record-breaking harvests that didn't exist.
Based on these false reports, the state took a massive percentage of the surplus grain to feed the cities and export to the Soviet Union to pay off debts. In many villages, the government took every last grain, leaving the farmers who grew it with nothing but husks and bark.
By 1959, the famine was most severe in provinces like Sichuan, Henan, and Anhui. Records describe people eating grass, sawdust, and even guanzhongguan white clay,
which offered a false sense of fullness but led to agonizing deaths. Internal party documents, kept secret for decades. Beatings, torture, and executions for those caught stealing a handful of grain. In 1962, the Great Leap was quietly abandoned. Liu Shaoqi, then chairman of the PRC, famously told Mao that the disaster was 30% natural disaster, 70% human error. Mao never forgot this challenge to his authority, tension that would eventually lead to the Cultural Revolution just a few years later. Today, the famine remains a sensitive subject in China, often referred to as the 3 years of natural disasters, despite weather data showing that the climate during those years was relatively normal.
The Great Chinese Famine serves as a haunting reminder of what happens when ideology ignores reality, and when the pressure for political success silences the truth of human suffering. It is a story of a nation's resilience, but also a warning of the cost of unchecked central power. Number 4. The September 11 attacks, 2001. It was a severe, clear Tuesday morning. That's what pilots call it. Limitless visibility, not a cloud in the sky. For millions of people in New York, Arlington, and Shanksville, it started as the most ordinary day of the year. But by 10:28 a.m., the world as we knew it had ceased to exist. In just 102 minutes, the geopolitical landscape, the way we travel, the collective psyche of the 21st century were fundamentally rewritten. This is the story of September 11, 2001.
The illusion of an accident vanishes. United Airlines strikes the South Tower on live television.
The terror spreads. American Airlines Flight 77 crashes into the western face of the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia. United Airlines Flight 93 crashes into a field. We would later learn of the incredible heroism of the passengers and crew who fought back,
preventing the plane from reaching its likely target, the U.S. Capitol or the White House.
At 9:59 a.m., the South Tower collapsed in 10 seconds. 29 minutes later, the North Tower followed.
Why do we still talk about 9/11 with such intensity? Because it wasn't just a day of tragedy, it was a pivot point. It taught us about our vulnerability, but also about our capacity for incredible bravery and resilience.
We remember the names not just to mourn how they died, but to honor the lives they lived.
History is often measured in before and after, and on that September morning, the after began for us all. Number 3. The Shadow of Silence, the Holocaust. History is often told through numbers, but numbers can be a shield. They protect us from the unbearable weight of individual stories. It wasn't just a byproduct of war, it was a state-sponsored industry of death. Before the gas chambers, there were the bullets. In June 1941, as Germany invaded the Soviet Union, the war shifted from territorial conquest to racial annihilation. Mobile killing squads followed the front lines. In ravines like Babi Yar, tens of thousands were murdered in mere days. By late 1941, Nazi leadership sought a more efficient and psychologically distant way to kill. The transition from open-air massacres to stationary killing centers began. January 1942, at the Wannsee Conference, the logistics of genocide were formalized. This was the final solution.
Concentration camps like Dachau and extermination camps, designed solely for mass murder. Auschwitz-Birkenau, the most infamous site, acting as both a labor camp and a death factory.
From across occupied Europe, from France to Greece, people were packed into cattle cars without food, water, or air. To paint the victims only as passive is a historical error. Resistance took many forms. The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising of 1943 saw starving civilians hold off the German army for nearly a month. Secret schools, the keeping of diaries, and the preservation of religious traditions were acts of defiance against a regime trying to erase their culture.
As the Allies closed in, the Nazis tried to hide their crimes, forcing prisoners on death marches into the German heartland. When the camps were finally liberated, the world saw what civilization was capable of. LGBTQ+ individuals, Jehovah's Witnesses, and political dissidents. Liberation wasn't the end of the suffering. Survivors often found they had no homes to return to and no families left to greet them.
The Holocaust didn't begin with gas chambers, it began with words. It began with the slow erosion of empathy and the normalization of hate. To remember 1941-1945 is not just a history lesson, it is a warning. Number 2. The 1931 Central China floods. In the summer of 1931, the world was distracted. The Great Depression was tightening its grip on the West,
and the drums of war were beating in Manchuria. But in central China, a catastrophe was unfolding that would dwarf every other headline.
It wasn't a war or a market crash. It was water. Before it was over, an area the size of England and half of Scotland would be submerged.
The death toll? Estimates range from 400,000 to nearly 4 million people. This is the story of the 1931 Central China floods, the deadliest natural disaster in recorded history. To understand how this happened, we have to look at the climate. From 1928 to 1930, China suffered through a brutal drought.
The ground was baked hard, unable to absorb moisture.
The winter, exceptionally heavy snowstorms hit the mountains.
The thaw, a rapid spring melt, sent a massive volume of water hurtling downstream.
Usually, this region sees 2 or 3 cyclonic storms a year. In July 1931 alone, 7 massive storms hit. In some areas, 2 feet of rain fell in a single month. The Yangtze River, the lifeblood of China, transformed into a monster. By August, the dikes, many of which were poorly maintained due to years of civil unrest, began to fail.
In the crowded refugee camps, these diseases spread like wildfire. More people died from the secondary effects of the flood than from the initial drowning.
Imagine waking up to find the horizon has disappeared. In the city of Wuhan, people lived on rooftops for weeks.
If you fell into the water, you weren't just at risk of drowning, you were entering a toxic soup of sewage and decay.
The 1931 floods forced a turning point in Chinese history. It highlighted the desperate need for modern hydraulic engineering and a unified government response. It led to the creation of the National Flood Relief Commission, one of the first major organized disaster relief efforts in the country.
Today, massive projects like the Three Gorges Dam were built specifically to ensure that the monster of the Yangtze stays within its banks. But the sheer scale of 1931 remains a haunting reminder of nature's power when the elements align.
We often remember the disasters that happen in an instant, earthquakes or eruptions.
But the 1931 floods were a slow-motion catastrophe that reshaped a nation. Imagine a world where 1/3 of everyone you knew simply vanished. No war, no famine, just a silent,
invisible killer that swept across continents faster than news could travel. The Black Death. In 1347, it didn't start in Europe. The plague likely originated in Central Asia, traveling along the Silk Road.
The catalyst, in 1347, Genoese trading ships fled the siege of Kaffa in the Black Sea.
When the ships docked in Sicily, the docks were met with a horror.
Most sailors were dead, those alive were covered in black, oozing sores.
From the ports, it raced upward through Italy, France, and into England by 1348.
The three flavors of death.
Groups of people wandered from town to town, whipping themselves publicly to appease what they believed was a vengeful god.
Mostly Jewish populations were horrifically persecuted and massacred.
In the 17th century, the image remains the ultimate symbol of medieval medical desperation.
It sounds morbid, but the Black Death actually ended the Middle Ages as we knew it.
The Black Death killed an estimated 75 to 200 million people. It was a catastrophe of biblical proportions.
Yet it paved the way for the modern world. It's a reminder that even in our darkest moments, humanity finds a way to rebuild.
If you found this deep dive into history valuable, please like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments which historical event you'd like us to cover next.